I want to bring in our political experts to get some serious analysis right now. Alyse Adamson, I'll start with you. After some initial setbacks, Trump has had a recent string of victories, legal victories. Does this mean the courts are unlikely to stop the Trump administration from dismantling much of the federal workforce?
Well, Wolf, that's a good question, but I think it's important to understand how Donald Trump is achieving these legal victories. And I think it's because this is a very well thought out legal strategy, and they are narrowing the issues so they're winnable. So, for instance, with the USAID workers, what happened here is the labor unions framed this as a dismantling of USAID. But the judge and the government were able to narrow the issue and call this really a labor dispute and said this is more about the workers who are being put on administrative leave and that USAID is still standing. So they refuse to reach the constitutional issues, which is can Donald Trump's actually issue an EO or dismantle USAID? They didn't even touch that on the merits. Similarly, all of these mass firings have been probationary period employees who don't have federal protection. So it's like they're taking the low hanging fruit as the wins, but the harder legal questions are still yet to come.
Lauren Tomlinson is with us as well. Lauren, Trump brushed the question aside when asked about the frustration from voters about these firings. I want to play a little bit of that. Watch this and listen.
Americans voted for you on the immigration and the economy, but these voters say they're angry and frustrated by these firings. They don't like the work of Elon Musk and these other actions. What do you say to them?
Who do you work for?
I work for ABC News, sir.
Who?
ABC News.
No wonder.
Well, what do you say to
Let
voters?
me just tell you that I have today the highest poll numbers I've ever had. They like the job that we're doing. They like the job that Elon's doing. He's doing something that a lot of people wouldn't have the courage to do. We want to streamline our country. We want to streamline, because you know why? Because we want our country to survive and thrive. And we're finding billions and billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Lauren, what did you make of that?
I believe that Donald Trump, it does have the highest polling that he has had from Trump 1 or whatnot. So he's not wrong in that, but he is doing a really great job, I think, of reorganizing the government to keep us solvent for the long term. And that's the key thing. I don't think that people are going to fully recognize the great work that he is doing to balance the budget until it is, several years from now, which means voters are not going to initially agree with maybe some of the chaotic nature of the reorganization of the government, the efficiencies that are going to come of this. But in the long term, once we are decreasing taxes, achieving a budget that is sustainable for long term, that is going to be very popular, I think, for the long term. And he's not wrong on that.
All right, everybody stand by for a moment. I want to bring in Oren Lieberman, our Pentagon correspondent. We're learning about some additional federal firings. Oren, update our viewers.
Wolf, we have wondered when the firing of probationary employees would reach the Pentagon, and we just got our answer a short time ago. The Pentagon announcing that the first tranche of 5,400 probationary employees will start being terminated as early as next week. But that's only the beginning. The numbers they're looking for are 5 to 8% of the civilian workforce, a number that could go as high as 76,000. Worth noting, of course, that the Pentagon has a civilian employee population of 950,000. Still, that's 76,000, the larger number, as high as they could be aiming for. Of course, the question, why not just fire them all at once? Well, as CNN reported earlier this week, any mass firing or termination of employees requires, by law, that the Pentagon effectively do a study and look into the effect that that might have on military readiness. And the Pentagon says they will further look into reducing the number of civilian employees. They say that's the ultimate goal here, but that requirement to make sure that it doesn't affect military readiness or to see the impact it may have on the military, that has at least led this to take place in phases. Again, the first phase of the firings next week, the Pentagon announces, including 5,400 of the first employees to be let go.
All right, Oren, stand by. I want to bring back our expert panelists. Lulu Garcia-Navarro, what's your reaction to these Pentagon firings?
I mean, we know that this was going to hit the Pentagon as well. The broader question here, though, is what are they aiming to do? How is this actually going to impact America's readiness, military readiness? I mean, we're seeing Donald Trump talking about being, allying essentially with Putin, dismissing the Ukrainians, making Canada and our traditional allies in Europe feel alienated from us. And now our military is basically getting a sledgehammer to it. And we again don't know why. Who exactly are making these decisions, and what exactly is going to be cut? This is America's very important, military that protects us, and so I think a lot of questions still need to be answered.
Many questions indeed. Gavin Reynolds, let me get your thoughts. What does this tell you about the Trump administration right now?
Well, Wolf, I think the American people deserve so much better from the Trump administration right now. It's not surprising that President Trump and Elon Musk started with agencies like USAID, agencies that honestly a lot of people haven't really heard of before. They don't really know what USAID does. But I think you're seeing the Trump administration now start to move through other agencies, and the consequences, in my opinion, will be drastic. Take USAID. It's going to have real impacts not only on the people who are laid off and their families, but on the people around the world who depend on the US's leadership on the world stage. And I think it's going to have a real impact on the US's national security interests as China makes inroads from a development perspective in regions where USAID has long been operating. I think looking at the broader, context here of what's going on, I think it's important for Democrats to endorse things like government efficiency, saving money. Those are good things. Jimmy Carter, former governor of my home state of Georgia, made those things priorities when he was governor. He reduced the size of the state government, but he did that because he actually wanted to create a government that could better serve its people. And if you're looking at what the Trump administration is doing, look, if you're thinking of taking your family on a spring break trip to a national park, it's important to know that President Trump has fired over 1,000 National Park Service employees. And if you're thinking of, if you're thinking about will your community get help after a forest fire, whether you're in Colorado or Montana or Connecticut or California, it's important to know that President Trump has fired over 3,000 Forest Service employees. If you want to have peace of mind when you're flying from point A to point B, right, you want to know that President Trump has fired FAA employees. And just today, it was reported that they're next moving on to an agency called NOAA, which is responsible for tracking hurricanes. So if you want to know if a hurricane is coming toward you, it's important to know that those cuts are coming as well. And all you have to do is look at my home state of Georgia, Roswell, Georgia, where Congressman Rich McCormick last night faced a barrage of constituents who are voicing their displeasure and their dissatisfaction with the Trump administration. And that's a district that voted for Trump by 22 points. So look, the Democrats need to connect these dots and make it clear to the American people as these firings and layoffs are happening, they will have very real impact and implications on their lives.
They certainly will. The impact of all these thousands of federal employees who are being fired will be significant, will be enormous, and the ramifications very significant. Everyone, thank you very much for your analysis.